If you had to guess, what do you think is the career success rate for wide receivers who had a lackluster rookie season? Do you think half of them find successful careers? Maybe you're more conservative and think a quarter of them find a way to turn things around. What if I told you the chances of success are lower than that? Much lower. That there's one singular number out there that can tell you everything you need to know about a young wide receiver, one magic number that will tell you whether to hold or bail before the bottom drops out. This is the threshold. This is Jalen Reagor. If you play fantasy football, you probably know his name. If you remember him for fantasy football, or because you're an Eagles fan, you probably don't remember Reagor fondly. As we stand at the release of this video, Reagor is a 3-year pro in the NFL. He is currently rostered by the Minnesota Vikings. He has 72 career receptions, 799 career yards, and 4 career touchdowns. This all in 3 years and 45 NFL games he has been active for. And he is one of the primary reasons I have discovered a trend in rookie wide receivers that has helped me know when to sell and never look back. The 2020 NFL season was a very interesting one from a fantasy perspective, particularly amongst rookies. The 2020 rookie class included names like Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, T. Higgins, CeeDee Lamb, and, hold your ears Eagles fans, Justin Jefferson. However, the class wasn't all highlights. It also contained names like Henry Ruggs, Denzel Mims, Bryan Edwards, and the aforementioned Reagor. When the 2020 season came to a close, I had a conversation with a good friend about Reagor. He had taken him in our 2020 rookie draft and was curious what I thought about him. This is one of those conversations where someone's asking you to make them feel better about something, like, hey, this shirt doesn't make me look fat, does it? The food tastes good, right? Reagor's still going to be good, isn't he? And I had to be the guy saying he was a bit oversalted. Sorry, overrated. My friend wasn't ready to sell, though. It's too early. He can still be awesome, and at first glance, that was justifiable to some degree. Reagor had a very up and down rookie season. Injuries and inconsistency in the offense could have caused lower numbers. If you had spent a late first round pick in your rookie drafts on Reagor, like many owners had, you probably weren't ready to completely give up either. But I wanted to look further into this, to find out the probability of Reagor's future based on other players' pasts. I wanted to know if there was any way to have the odds play in my favor and to judge a player's entire career based off of an incredibly small sample size. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I started pulling data. And it was a lot of data. At the time, I pulled the stats for the careers of every wide receiver from 2015 to 2019 that was drafted in the first 3 rounds of a rookie draft based on their ADP. This was 80 wide receivers and their stats from 320 individual NFL seasons. And now I had all this data, a giant Excel sheet begging for me to insert some charts. And I had to figure out something to do with it. I looked at the names, and some were very easy to say, oh yeah, they were great in their NFL career, and some were even easier to say, they sucked, they didn't do anything in the NFL. But there was a middle ground of players that had recognizable names and had some success in the NFL that sort of bridged the gap, and I started to think about fantasy success and what players needed to do to be considered a success. And it seems pretty simple. They needed to be near the top of their position in a season, if not for multiple seasons, to feel like they were a decent fantasy contributor. But getting to the point of fantasy success can take some time. It doesn't always happen right away. Maybe Reagor had hope and the rookie season was an outlier. So, what did we need to see from a wide receiver early on to know that we could trust they were worth keeping? A lot of guys that were bad their rookie season had to have been great later on, right? I decided one of the simplest things I could do would be to plot all of these receivers on a chart and see if anything stood out. So I did. And a gap appeared. Very quickly, an area formed that was separating this chart. And it happened to coincide with a very even number for referencing when looking at these wide receivers. The low number of the gap was 60 and the high number was 80. And this is where I decided I would create the threshold, a magical line that I would use to see what the probability of success was if a player was below or above this particular round mark. Very simply, in half-point PPR, a rookie wide receiver needed to score 80 points or more in their rookie season for us to have confidence that they are not a bust as a fantasy player. This threshold was not made to determine that anyone above the threshold was a long-term success. It was simply created to see how players did if they did not make it to this very achievable level in their first year. 80 points, broken down, it's 5 points per game on average. I didn't care if the player got hurt. I didn't care if their QB was a journeyman or bad. I didn't care if they got suspended for issues outside of the game. 80 points. Did you make the mark? Cool. Did you miss it? Well, now I want to know what you did from there. And let me tell you, setting this threshold at this point gave me some very interesting numbers based on the 5 years of data I had from previous wide receivers. From 2015 to 2019, there were 46 wide receivers out of the 80 that I pulled that didn't hit that 80-point threshold. 46 under the bar and 34 above it. Of that list of 46, only 6 of them averaged 100 points or more in their season after their rookie campaign as of 2021. These 6 are Nelson Aguilar, DJ Chark, Corey Davis, Chris Godwin, Curtis Samuel, and Mike Williams. 6 names out of 46 managed to average over 100 points a season after their rookie year, a bar that honestly was not that high. Zooming slightly forward to our present, Aguilar, Chark, Davis, and Samuel being exceptions on this list is a bit generous of me. Through the 2022 season, these 4 have combined for 25 seasons of football, and in these 25 seasons, they combined to produce no wide receiver 1 seasons and just 2 wide receiver 2 seasons. Aguilar in 2017 was wide receiver 22, and Chark in 2019 was wide receiver 16. So, if I'm not being generous, this really leaves just Godwin and Williams as exceptions to the rule. Williams had a great 2021, finishing as a wide receiver 1, but for the rest of his career, the highest he has ever finished was wide receiver 24 on a season. But because of his big 2021 and some worthwhile years mixed in, we will call him an exception. Godwin was wide receiver 2 overall in 2019, and has had a couple wide receiver 2 seasons as well, so he is most certainly an exception. But that was it. 2 names out of 46. And I didn't stop in the winter of 2021. I have continued to chart this in the 2 seasons since the initial Rager question. And since the first run of this data, only 1 more wide receiver has made it to the exceptions list. Michael Pittman Jr. Pittman failed to reach the 80-point threshold his rookie year, scoring 78.9 fantasy points in the 13 games he played. I could have said, well, he basically cleared this because he likely would have made up the 1.2 fantasy points if he had played the other 3 games that he missed, but that isn't what the threshold is about. No matter the circumstance, you make it or you don't. It's a hard line. It doesn't matter if you're injured. Since that rookie year, Pittman has put together back-to-back wide receiver 2 seasons, finishing as wide receiver 15 and wide receiver 23 the last 2 years. But while adding Pittman as the 3rd exception, 21 more wide receivers have been drafted in rounds 1, 2, and 3 in rookie drafts and not made it to the 80-point threshold their rookie year. Well, 85 points now. As an extra regular season game was added to the NFL schedule for every player, the threshold increased by that 5 points per game average. That would mean that since 2015, only 3 of the 67 rookies who didn't make it to the threshold their rookie season went on to have at least 2 seasons of being wide receiver 2 or better. That's only a 4.48% chance of being a shooting star and breaking the mold. Hey now. And that's the Hall of Fame class you can hang your hat on. The "your system is bogus" group that proves this is stupid. 7 NFL seasons of rookie wide receivers charted. 67 different receivers who didn't make it to the threshold their rookie year. And 3 names stand to be the exception to the rule. A Mount Rushmore one face short of complete. Mike Williams, Chris Godwin, Michael Pittman. Also, as a fun fact, as we speak, Sleeper ADP has these 3 wide receivers as wide receiver 15, wide receiver 20, and wide receiver 23 in Dynasty startups. They are still considered wide receiver 2s now. And so I told this to my friend. Hey, your cooking sucks. But he doubled down anyway. He held on to Rager. So did another owner who had Brian Edwards that year. The next year, I shared the history of the threshold with another friend, and he held on to Rashad Bateman anyway. And I've told it to every Treylon Burks and Romeo Dobbs owner this offseason. And to quote the Burks owner, lol, agree to disagree, winky face. Rookie campaign with subpar QB play and injury? I'll happily hold. And as I said to him, there have been exceptions, and it can absolutely still work out for you. This isn't a law. It's just very, very lopsided probability. And you may ask yourself why anyone would take such a short sample size and apply it to major decisions with their fantasy team. Can you give up on a guy because of one mediocre or lousy year at the start of their career? Especially if you invested a first-round pick in drafting them? Well, in short, yes, you can. The numbers don't lie. But forget numbers for a second. Here's a list of every wide receiver from 2015 to 2021 that was drafted with a first-round ADP that did not hit the threshold. Are you looking at any of these names fondly? Were any of these players game changers for your Dynasty team? The odds are stacked very high against you that your player will gain more value than they currently have after a mediocre rookie season. And value is everything in fantasy football. No matter what kind of fan you are of a player or a team or how much you believe in someone based on tape or intuition or faith, value is all that matters. Let's take that player that started this entire process for me back in February of 2021, Jalen Reagor. Reagor's ADP in May 2020, right after he was drafted 21st overall by the Eagles in the 2020 NFL Draft, was wide receiver 25 and 50.83 overall. A year later, in May of 2021, 3 months after I advised anyone I could to sell Reagor, his ADP was wide receiver 46 and 95.83 overall. And 1 year ago, in May 2022, after 2 full seasons of playing in the NFL, Reagor was above wide receiver 117 and above 271 overall. And I say above because my ADP chart only goes up to 117 wide receivers and 271 total players. Reagor wasn't on the list. In 2 years, Reagor went from being a top 25 wide receiver asset to essentially being available on the waiver wire in every fantasy league, even though he was still only 23 years old. A player's career is not over because of a bad rookie season, and neither is their value. If a wide receiver has a slow start to their career, their value dips, but we still have interest in them. But if they have 2 bad seasons, this is a trend now. Their value is going to plummet, and our interest is near gone. You can still salvage value now and recoup some of your investment. You can look at a player like Treylon Burks right now, whether you own him or not, and say, yeah, I think he still will be good. But what happens if his 2023 campaign's mediocre? Do you believe in him then? And more importantly, does anyone else believe in him? If you own him, do you think you can sell him? Keep this in mind as you evaluate rookie wide receivers. There's no shame in selling someone a year early, but there's a lot of sadness in selling them a year too late. How much do you trust your players to be the exception to the rule? What are you going to do if your rookie does not hit the threshold?